Hello, thank you for joining us for this professional learning opportunity. I am Scott Mathias from NCEA, and I will be your host today. Today's webinar, Cultivating Diversity and Inclusivity in Youth Choral Programs, is being led by Dr. Marcela Molina, Executive Director of the Tucson Girls Chorus in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Molina has been affiliated with the Tucson Girls Chorus since 2006, first serving as Artistic Director and then taking the helm as Executive Director in 2011. Under Dr. Molina's guidance, the Tucson Girls Chorus has grown significantly in program and community engagement. Before I turn it over to Dr. Molina, let us begin in prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father, we ask for your guidance during these times and for your wisdom to be imparted to each of us as we listen to the information being presented today. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dr. Molina, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to share my screen so we can start our presentation. Okay. So our subject today is about how we cultivate diversity, inclusivity in our core programs. That I think it will go a little bit beyond that in regards of what is our role as human beings, right? Into how do we do that also for ourselves. Before we start, we want to thank our host, our sponsor for this webinar today, the American Federation of Pueri Cantores. You can read here what they do, the amazing work that they do, especially so much youth is involved in this organization, which is so great. And if you want to know, and they have these wonderful choral festivals that are everywhere, and I know that they are trying to go to also underserved communities. So we want to thank Pueri Cantores for their sponsorship for this webinar. And if you are not familiar with their work, I will encourage you to go to the website at pcchoirs.org. So this is what we talked about, what we put together for what our mission today is today, right? Engaging with a diverse community requires partnerships, active listening, learning curves, reflection, and action. So how can we make choir and musical activities appealing and inclusive for students of diverse backgrounds during formative years, and how do we retain their enrollment and through elementary, middle, and high school? So we will discuss how through programming, choir programs can recruit and retain students from various backgrounds. This is the order of what we're going to talk about. I will give just a very short overview of where I work and what we have done, and then we are going to talk a little bit about social emotional learning, which I think is going to be really important for our. It is really important for our purpose of trying to include people and diversify our programming. We're talking about ideas on how we engage the singer, how we engage the family, how we engage the community, and then we'll leave some time for questions and answers and some reflection time. So the Tucson Girls Chorus is a diverse group of young women that we use music as a vehicle for greater things. It's a nonprofit. We currently, our numbers are lower than 240 in regards of our weekly programming, but usually we have around 240. We operate in a couple of locations, central location on the northwest side, and serving K through 12, and we have 11 ensembles altogether, which includes a choir for kids with all abilities, and we have a specialist for kids with disabilities, and we have engagement programming inside of that location. And this is in partnership with Title I schools, and these are schools that mostly serve families that are under poverty guidelines, and then we also have a robust music educator support, where we partner with our music educators to go into their schools to support them in the way that they want or they need at that particular moment. It could be vocal technique for the choir, or working on a specific piece that they are working and they just want to have new blood coming in to kind of reassess and basically say what the teachers probably have been saying for so long, but somebody else says and it makes sense suddenly for the students. And also professional development for the teachers. So what why I wanted you to show you this is that we didn't start here. We started very much very local, very insulated. We're an affluent part of the city, and we were in our building. And the way that our program grew and was diversified is when we got out of our building and we started serving the community at different parts of the community, understanding the community that we were working with, and really partnering with them to create programming that was relevant, and as teachers then creating lesson plans and have pedagogically relevant information and processes for the students. So social emotional learning and teaching. We these 5 topics that we have here are important to every single lesson plan, I think. How do we inspire the student, right, and give them a big idea with learning goals? How do we explore that idea and facilitate, give the students the agency to really come up with what they want to have, what their vision is? How do we elevate, right, and refine and revise after we explore the idea, and there are many ideas, and we give the space for the student to talk about what those ideas are? Then how we just like filter it down to maybe the one that as a group we want to explore. So we refine and we revise. How do we assess? So when we come out to the other side and we have the product, right, what we call the product of whatever that may be, how do we assess? This is before presenting, right? So when we work all the details, how do we assess? And that will require critical listening. And then after we present, how do we share our feelings on that and how we reflect? If you look at those 5 points, I will want you to think about, this is not only for how you could approach the music that you are teaching with those in mind, right? Like just say we have a piece of music and we can present it to our students and then create spaces for the students to think about how can we make this music more to elevate the music that is in front of them. How do we explore ideas on what to add and what not to add, what is relevant? And there's a lot of negotiation here. How we elevate this piece of music, right, with historical context, with the addition of instruments, with the addition of a partner, and then assess and present, right? So that could be one. It's just like if you have an octavo, a piece of music, and then you explore those 5 items, or if you come up with a creative output that will be theirs. And I know that sometimes, at least for me, that is more scary, because sometimes I'm like, oh gosh, I don't even know how to facilitate that. But what you are going to be surprised is that the creativity of your students, and if you give them the agency to share different ideas, they will come up with amazingly wonderful options to do it. So one way to do it is to have let's just say a good place to start, I would say, is to start with something that is common, that is known, that you feel comfortable and your students feel comfortable, and then you take it from there. So then, the students create a baseline, and then the other students then create some percussion that could be added. And I'm kind of like boil it down to like action items, but what it does is that it creates some ownership of the student, and it creates a wonderful opportunity to create community in the process, which is going to support your desire for the students to continue with you. If you create a space where they feel like they belong, when they feel that they have a voice and that it is heard and that it is validated, then they more likely it is a big pool for them to remain with the program. Sometimes it takes, no, sometimes no, always it takes a lot of work. Why? Because building relationships in general takes work. right? So how do we create a space for these students that they could feel validated when they are presenting an idea? It's very, very scary to present an idea sometimes for the student that doesn't feel very comfortable, very confident in themselves. So how do we create a space where that students feel safe to share the idea that will elevate the common goal, right? And how do we create a space for the student who is has natural leadership skills and has a very strong musical background to also feel that they are contributing without just giving the spotlight to the student and then making it all about one voice, right? So how can we teach those students to, and this is going to help them in life, right? Like when to lead and when to be in a supportive role. So some of the SEL goals and outcomes. So within the student, this is what what we're talking a little bit about, right? So it's decision making, right? They get to decide how they want this music to go, if they are creating the space or they're creating the piece of music, or even for a piece of music that you choose for them. How do they manage their emotions and their behaviors when possibly it doesn't go their way? So how can we give them tools and anticipate that some of this will happen? How do we create, or how we create, self-awareness with recognizing that there is an emotion and it is okay to feel disappointed, but how do we react to the disappointment? How do we highlight their strengths and also their challenges, and that it is okay to have a challenge? How do we create social awareness in relationship skills, meaning like we are going to show empathy for the one that maybe got the idea validated and the one whose idea was not in the final count. How does that student could support the other student and vice versa? How do we build community in a positive relationship where we have a culture of kindness and empathy? And how the sharing of the idea is something that requires trust, and that the idea will grow in whatever way it is. So even if the origin of the idea wasn't for student A, but it was from student B, that student A will also have that ownership, and that another idea that is going to be added into that, it will also contribute to the common goal. That is basically on the student. For the teacher, is how, as role models, we build connections and facilitate dealing with conflict and disappointment, and also elation, right? How do we take care of the student who is also very happy about it? How do we create a space for singers that make them feel seen, that make them feel heard and validated? The power dynamic, how do we give the students the agency to, as part of their musical learning? So we sometimes, I think, underestimate that the student could do X, Y, and Z because of X, Y, and Z characteristics. So there are so many ways in which the student could have the agency to lead their own learning, and to start creating and getting a bag of tools where they could really have ownership into their own process and their own journey as really independent learners. I always see the conductor and I think this may break a little bit of the understanding or the belief that there is the conductor and then there is the students, right, and this hierarchy. I try to always share with my students, and it has been really positive, is that I am a facilitator, but we are partnering. There is a partnership between you and me to create this. I will facilitate it because, of course, I have the knowledge, I'm the adult, etc., etc. But by giving them a lot of power with guidelines and boundaries and all the teachers things that we do, the facilitation of the process will create a lot of trust. Cultural responsive teaching. So if we are, what are those assets that students bring without tokenizing, right? If we have, let's just say in a community, we have the one Hispanic kid, how do we, and we are doing a Spanish song, how do we validate his experience without making him responsible of teaching it to everybody, or making him responsible to be the one who knows, to tokenize it. So there are different ways of doing culturally responsive teaching, but it is important is that the that we open the space for all of these different cultures to come into your classroom, to give the opportunity for the students to teach without burdening the student, but also for that non-dominant perspective, right, of the kid who lives in a dominant world in terms of what we see often. Um, it is a wonderful opportunity to learn about the world, and for the non-dominant, for the 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 non-dominant experience to feel validated, that their view is also, their culture, where they come from, is just really relevant also and important for the world. Start with examining ourselves. How can we as human beings find our own community that will help us into the process, in the journey of teaching in a different way that will validate the student. And then what do we program, right? So we program the rep, we create our lesson plan, and then the what is in front of us is very different from what we plan. So how do we adjust quickly, and how do we learn from past mistakes? So how do we engage the singer? We need to go beyond learning their names, and I know that I'm sure a lot of you do know your student, but if we can go beyond just the 2 hours that you see them, or the 3 hours or the 4 hours that you see them, in regards of just knowing their names, or seeing them in a way of powerful human beings that have a lot to contribute. So what are the strengths of the singers? Can we utilize those for the group? We do a lot of emotional check-ins. This has worked really well for us in regards, and it is really a fine line. What I have found is that, it could be like a moment where everyone is just like, oh my gosh, I'm so depressed. And it happens, right? Where it's just like, especially in teenage years, we find a lot of, and I don't mean to minimize that is really happening. It is really happening for them. But how do we put a boundary so it doesn't become, just a space where everyone is just going really in a dark place, but they have the space to share that, but also to share some of the light that they have in their lives. So we manage where sometimes is they just need to share about their hard times, but we also want to make sure that we facilitate when they, on another time, when they can share something that was positive. And then building relationships between each singer and the conductor, and then them without the conductor, right? Like, how do we nurture a relationship that is for them to be stronger as an ensemble, because they just get along, and then there is again a culture of kindness. Pedagogy. Points of access are so important. And I have learned this with our Tutti choir, which is our choir for kids with disabilities. What we have found is, and what I have learned is, I have kids there that are nonverbal. And you would think like, well, how is a nonverbal kid or in choir? Well, they tap, they add instruments to their experience. Sometimes when they are creating a work, right, because sometimes the choir creates their own work, there's speaking parts that they can do with their device, and create a culture for your audience where that is okay, right? So points of access, and this is also not for kids with disability, but kids that learn a different way. So the singer, so if you know the singer, you're going to know how does this particular student process the information. So we have the whole score. We have a modified version where we just have the one line. We have just lyrics because they get really, is very hard for them to follow. And I understand that maybe part of our goal is to make these kids musical literate, but sometimes that will take time. So where do we start, right? And then make up a map of a listening map with the form of the piece, or just create the form. So in your teaching, in your pedagogic, in your teaching during the rehearsal, to have several ways, if you know who your students are, where they can access the music in a different way. So we call that points of access. Repertoire, I would say that for creating an inclusive and diverse group, the repertoire is very important. However, it's not the only thing. it's got to be part of the DNA of your program and your approach to pedagogy and your approach to how you do the concerts, where you do the concerts, and the partnerships that you have in the community. But the repertoire is important. So we are representing your singers with the music that you sing. There's an opportunity to affirm students' backgrounds as valid and important. We were talking about the dominant and the non-dominant, and opportunities to create, which goes back to what I was talking about of the 5 points of access, right? Where you can refine, assess, reflect, all of that, bring the big idea and then refine it to one, etc. So creating a product that comes from them. If you have, I am not sure if you will have only choirs or kids that are just in a music program without necessarily being a choir, but those kids that maybe don't want to necessarily sing, how do we involve them in the process? Creating special social spaces and opportunities, so do your singers know each other? I think sometimes we are so caught up in the timing that we have because we have a concert and we have all of these restraints and obligations. So but if you take a little bit of time every single rehearsal to create some sort of a social connection where they have the time to know each other, and there's then mentorships opportunities that are going to come out of that between your own choir and different choirs that are in your organization. If that is the case, between your own choir, I rely a lot on my seniority, and I'm sure a lot of us do, but I think they love it. They love having the opportunity to lead, to be role models, and to mentor younger singers because they were once those singers. And if you can connect the dots to that experience, it will be very beneficial. Modern rep. So an objective of the program obviously is to include pieces in a variety of languages from a variety of traditions. This affirms the expertise of the singer from the non-dominant backgrounds and cultural traditions into spaces without tokenizing or respecting labor to educate their peers. So a lot of this labor, it has to go where you have an open conversation with that particular student. Is it okay for you? Or do you want to participate in teaching this? Do you want to feel comfortable? So a lot of it is just how you put the student in a situation where the student, it may be an opportunity for the student to feel very empowered or extremely uncomfortable. So this is part of you knowing your student. As a whole, I want you to think about, does your repertoire choices, do they increase the student confidence? Then they create a new and stronger relationships and develop an affirmation and empathy for cultures and ways of understanding the world? Meaning, are you picking rap that is in a variety of backgrounds? Does it include a humanistic approach to music education by decentralizing Western singing styles as the top hierarchy in global music traditions? And I understand that for church music, it comes from a really Western style, but is there another way, that you could decentralize it? And that doesn't mean that it's not important, but making it just equal to maybe other music traditions that can also share the message that you want to share through music. Do you celebrate singing styles and repertoire from other traditions? For example, I put mariachi here, but the Hispanic repertoire for it is just so vast, and the style of singing is so different from what we know as the Western style, right? As bel canto style. So this practice creates profound opportunities for students to practice appreciating music from different peoples, and especially music from traditions that are not their own. So creating and this again, it says, creating a diverse program is much more than the music that you decide to program in your rep. It has to be part of the DNA of your teaching and of your program itself. So can you answer this for yourself? Creating continuity from elementary through high school will depend on how the singers feel during those formative years. We know that kids change and they evolve and they change there's change in interest. But if your student feels seen and feels heard and feels validated and feels like a contributor, then most likely will stick around. Of course, there's so much you can control and we can please everyone. But seeing the individual, and you can think about as a human being, this is not because they are kids, it's as a human being, when you feel like you are seen and what you have to say has been validated. It creates tremendous and profound validation that you belong into that particular community. Okay, engaging the singer. So this goes here in the rehearsal process. How are we building trust? Do you show your own vulnerability to your singers? Do you get out of your way in your conducting, creating this unspoken language where you're like, I trust you? Sometimes conductors, when they are over conducting, it creates this mistrust between the singer and the conductor. So how can you get out of the way and in these unspoken moments that are so important in a rehearsal process, which is when you are conducting the piece? That creates trust. That process also creates trust. It's not only what you talk about, but it's also what you do when you are making the music. Teenagers' issues. Do you have open conversations about their struggles, about their mental health, about the problems that in different situations? Do you have open discussions about difficult subjects? And sometimes this is not possible, right? Because of some other constraints, but can you create a space for that? Is it appropriate? And if it's not appropriate, disregard, right? Or how you can facilitate for that student to go to the appropriate source of support. Do you invest your time in your rehearsal for emotional check-in or for a check-in or social check-in? Although social, it just becomes a little like, oh, they're going to socialize. No, social with an intention, with a moment where they have the space to connect with each other on a human level. How do we create a sense of belonging? Do you build a sense of pride for the music making of their ensemble? What I've seen in our choirs is that there's tremendous sense of pride of their product, right? And because they have the agency to contribute to the decision making because they created themselves, and then there was a lot of process of like negotiating, but it is theirs, so they feel proud of what they have done, and that creates that it belongs to them, right? And they belong to the process. Do you develop critical listening? And that is an example that are you doing it? Are you really listening to them on a deeper level? Do you are you and you develop awareness within your ensemble of each community, of their community that you are working with? And then an assertion that you create a space for an assertion that their voice matters, even if sometimes seems really silly. They need to be feel heard. Building leadership, it is tremendously important. So in your rehearsal process, how do you enable and nurture leadership? You can create officers and that will help you with events. You can create section leaders that will help you musically, and again, you are training. And what I've seen sometimes with section leaders is that they don't know how to lead, right? That they get caught up in their own personalities and immaturity sometimes, right? So how do you give them the tools? Like, no, it's not your job to be disciplined in but so you have to have a really open communication with them. How do you mentor your ensemble within your choir? So again, your seniors, are you mentoring? Are you giving an opportunity for them to mentor, to have really a space so they decide how that mentorship will look like? How are we going to keep our singers accountable? The most success I've had is when the students are part of the conversation in regards of deadlines or things that are we need to get done. And I said, well, now we're up and we need to memorize. When? So what is reasonable for you to memorize first? Oh, yeah, I anticipate two. Okay, got it. When? And sometimes they're like, oh, 4 measures. I'm like, forget. I mean, of course, you need to make sure that you are not just, get them, just get away with like bare minimum. But if they are part of the decision making in terms of their own deadlines, they are going to make they will be most likely, and they still sometimes get away, sometimes they just push it and then they don't do it, but I call them on it. So if they come and they say in 2 weeks we're going to have memorized until measure 50, and we have 2 weeks, and then comes measure, and they are not memorized on measure 50, I call them on it. I say, you told me that you will be memorized up until today, so next time I need you to speak the truth or you need to follow through. But it's also, again, they are in that process of learning. Is they are learning about what is reasonable, what they can handle, what did they do, and I ask questions. What do you think you did that did? Why are the reasons why you didn't meet the deadline that you put? And that reflection, given the space for them to reflect and then verbalize it, It's just not only a gift that you are giving them for the music process, but a gift of life for them when they go into adulthood. Families. So we work with them, and they are part of who we are. So we do a lot of surveys, at the end of the year of how do they feel. And then I put Spanish here just because we are in a community that has a big Hispanic community, Mexican American community. So there are communities that we have who of kids whose parents don't speak English. So am I aware of that? Yes. So if I am aware of that, then I'm going to create materials that are also for them so they feel included, because they also need to feel heard and seen and that they belong. So we gather the data and then we take action. We seek measurable outcomes. What is it that we want to see? We want to see retention, right? So through these surveys of like how and very simple questionnaire, because nobody wants to be 15 minutes in a survey. So you got to think about what is it what I need to know. Was this enjoyable? Did you see an increase of X, Y, and Z? What kind of repertoire would you like to see? Like kind of three of these or suggestions on repertoire that you like that are part of your culture and the organization that you are representing. So we have asked at the end of the semester, what is your childhood song? And we have families from all over, and then they share the childhood song and then we have tried to make it happen sometimes, right? So it creates an archive of potential repertoire that is going to be relevant for your particular community and that resonates and that familiar singing, right? Establish a trusting relationship with a parent or family member. Are you curious about them as people? When you get to meet them, do you create the space to know a little bit about them, what their situation is? A phone call goes a long way. Sometimes as parents, I'm the mother of an adult stepdaughter and two teenage boys, and sometimes I only hear when they mess up, right? Elliot didn't do his homework, blah blah blah, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Elliot. So, but sometimes it's good to hear they're doing great, you know, and a phone call and say, or I noticed that so and so was a little off today. Is she or is he having a hard time in some other areas? So this is what I have observed. Like nip it in the bud immediately, or I just want to call and say that, or an email and say, oh, they're doing amazing. I just noticed this about them. So it's also your keen interest and nature to really be observant of the dynamics of your group and how is that affecting certain behaviors in a positive way or in a negative way, your kids, right? The behavior of your kids. And as always, it's just about building relationships. So again, you're building a relationship with the student. Oh my gosh, you're your student, but I'm sorry, but you also need to build a relationship with the family because you are recruiting the family with the singer. I mean, if the singer says I don't want to do it anymore, it will, the family most likely will support that. But but the family needs to be part of it. Parents, are you giving them some leadership roles? I mean, we have parent reps. I don't know if that will work. So anything that doesn't work for the nature of your organization, disregard. But maybe this will spark an idea. So we have parent reps that are really involved in and helping us into welcoming other families, into being cheerleaders of the organization, and create events that are for parents or for parents and the kids, to create social events that are outside of choir, and then an end of the year gathering. I love this quote because it really talks about the community and the changes that we want to see. So there is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. And that has really resonated with me because I have made mistakes in my community engagement programming. I have created programs without asking a particular community. So let me tell you a story. We have a lot of indigenous communities here in Arizona, and in particularly in Tucson, there is one indigenous community. It's called Paswayaki, the Paswayaki people. And I thought, oh my gosh, if we can go to the Paswayaki reservation and present this program. This was about 8 years ago. In a very well-intended but arrogant way, I said, oh my gosh, they're gonna love this, because who doesn't? Who doesn't want to have this for free. So I just went in there and I bulldozed my idea through the reservation, and I partnered with the Boys and Girls Club of the reservation, and we created an engagement, what we call an engagement program. It was a study allocation there, subsidized because we had the funding, and I did not ask one question about what this community care about. To this day, I don't even know. I didn't ask. I didn't have one partner that will be an ally with me to teach me. And I'm not blaming on them. It's not blaming on me for not being curious enough. For just saying like everyone wants to know it. Everyone should know it. Everyone should take advantage of it. So it didn't last. Obviously, it lasted 6 months, and we had very low participation. I didn't have the right conductor there. I didn't have the right approach. I didn't. It made me feel really good, but now after a few years, I'm embarrassed, right? To be like, I didn't even ask a question. So now we have programs in cellular location in partnership with Title I schools, and the partnership is what makes this important because they are just as committed to keep it going as us because they care and because they want it. So then there is synergy, and then there is an open communication, and then it's a learning process. So it's not transactional, right? Where I just give it to you and we'll provide it for you. When it comes to the community. So when we reach to the community, we're reaching to partner and not to provide. And I think when I switched that in my mind, things got more fluid. I'm not going to provide you this service because I am the expert, right? Can we partner in this, and what can you bring and what can I bring, and how is it that between the two of us, parallel power, can we make this work? So how are you partnering with other schools or other community organizations? Do you know other Catholic music teachers that are in your community that are working in the Catholic, under the Catholic umbrella? What is your strength, and what can you support and provide without being a transactional relationship to that particular partner? Partnering with organizations that are not musically focused. So we have partnered with literacy organizations. We have partnered with dance companies. We have partnered with an array, and I know that I'm a little bit more flexible because I don't have a religious umbrella that that needs to have that with those guidelines. Successful cross-cultural depends on an active role from the community partner. So right now we are partnering with the Tohono O'odham Nation, which is another indigenous community in Arizona. It is not in Tucson, and so far so good. And I'll tell you why. It's because the partner wants it as bad as we do. Because we were invited. I approached this organization. It was a foundation that works very closely at the Tohono O'odham, and I said, "Do you guys have music in there? And do you see a partnership being any beneficial?" They loved it so much, and they were like, "Yes, we would love to have no music education in our elementary schools at all. Nothing, no general music or anything." And we are like 3 hours away, so it's not like it's in our we can go there, but right now the Tohono O'odham has a very strict restriction, so everything is shut down anyway, so they are doing virtual. So I said, we can do virtual. And so we were invited, right, to go into their community. And that just helps historical trauma. I mean, there is so much to just that. And our meetings has been with the foundation, and then people at the Tohono O'odham Nation that are working there with the foundation, but they are Tohono O'odham and students. The students leaders we identify, and they helped us identify. We didn't do it. They identified student leadership that are part of the conversation. So we're creating a curriculum for this next cycle of music, of virtual music making that we're gonna do, and they are part of the student leaders are part of the conversation. They want to add some of the Tohono O'odham language. How can we add some of the instruments? How can we add some of the singing that they are going to teach? So it is validating for them. We are learning from the process, and then they are also learning from the process. Choral festivals. I mean, Puerto Rican Tourist has this Epori Cantores has all these wonderful festivals, but there's power on you creating some of the festivals. Here we have a music advisory board, so we have a music teachers that kind of guide some of the conversation for these events that we want to put together, because sometimes we come up with ideas and then it doesn't resonate, and we are like, well, we're doing this for the students, and who are the students with the teachers. So we talk to the teachers about, does this date work for this? Is what festival? And then they have come up with these festivals that, we are in Tucson, and a lot of the things are in Phoenix, so they want to have some experiences in Tucson, especially schools that don't have the means to go to Phoenix and participate in those more expensive festivals. So we are creating those. We're filling the gap. So how can you maybe partner with other schools or other communities to create your local events? Summer camp we do, and then we are working on establishing a really strong relationship with our alumni. I would say that this probably is the hardest part. Is we have alums. I mean, that that uh, that that leave town, and it's hard to keep up, and how do we remain, keep them engaged? And sometimes don't want to be engaged, but sometimes they do. So how do we do that? So it's one of the hardest ones. Okay. All right. So, do you know your community? Do you know what are the obvious and hidden barriers for participation? For us, for our kids to participate, it was transportation, financial background, parents working multiple jobs. So, what do we need to do? We got out of the building. We went to the schools. We looked for the funding. We are slowly growing, so it's sustainable. So it's not something that it just showed up, right? And then it's not long lasting. So we started knowing the community. Who are they? What are the interests? Do they want to partner? Do they want to grow something together? What are the barriers for those kids to participate in the program? And how do we break those? Points of access comes again. So are you collaborating with organizations? Sometimes we have created a program that is not with a concert goal, performance goal. So it is very experiential. So we have partnered with the Boys and Girls Club to do, this is not the Paswayaki. I have other partnerships with the Boys and Girls Club that have been successful. So we have done this like very 6 weeks, like shorter programming, right? Like sometimes the amount of time that is a commitment for a longer period of time is very scary, especially for older kids. So we offer options. So we have a whole full-blown year, and then like 6-week programs or 10-week programs, and then we creatively think of opportunities in satellite locations that will expose the program to other communities. And I always think about a ripple effect. Like if we make a difference in that particular community, maybe that one student is going to be the next music teacher or the next community leader that is going to make a difference. Creating a menu of songs to sing by rote, sometimes pedagogically, when you just shift the hat of not community leader, but just music teacher in the classroom. Like how can we really teach for a different type of students? Sometimes they are not in a place where they can read at that point, and they should be at an age that they are reading. It doesn't matter, right? So how can we create a point of access so they can still sing and participate? Do the singers contribute to the repertoire? I mean, if that is possible, do they have a voice in that? On how do we create it? And then again, just shorter in length, programming that is shorter in length. So have patience. Relationships, they work, right? It takes time. You gotta build and invest in relationship from a really genuine interest and for the right reasons. Sometimes we're so caught up in our big passion project, in our big vision idea, and this is me with the Paswayaki program, right? Where I thought like, oh my gosh, so brilliant, it's so beautiful. We're gonna bring music to this really underserved community, and we're just gonna change lives through, because who does not want to sing? I had to drop that idea, right? Because something more beautiful needed to happen for me, was a learning experience. And now that we have a program in the Tohono O'odham Nation, I'm learning so much from them. and from what a good partnership or a healthy partnership looks like. But mainly it's just like, are you asking questions? Are you asking questions to your students if you are inside the classroom? Are you asking questions to your community partners? If you are at a school, are you collaborating with another department? Are you asking questions to that particular teacher of ways in which that particular department maybe want to collaborate? Are you going beyond your classroom? Are you going beyond your building to contribute and to collaborate and partner for a project? So keep listening, keep partnering, keep acting, and making sure that we shift this providing to a really genuine partnership and to really a real interest in building the relationship with the student, with the family, and with their community that is surrounding them. So let's just have a Q&A and reflection. I know that some of this and some of it may seem like, oh, I heard this a million times. Hopefully there is something that resonated. I do want to say, if you want to go back to the social, to learn a little bit more about social emotional learning in your classroom, I highly recommend this book. It's called Music Education and Social Emotional Learning by Scott Edgar. And it has so much wonderful insights, and it has also like a workbook that you can create some lesson plans with your students. It's called Musical Emotional Learning, the Heart of Teaching Student Handbook, and it has lots of goodies in here to work with them. But that was like another side. But let's just have a Q&A and let's just see what what questions you may have, what concerns you may have that you want to discuss. I'm sure that a lot of you share the same concerns or the same goals, or the same struggles or challenges or successes. So this is an open space to share and comment and ask questions. Scott, you can
So
help us with
yes,
that.
everyone, if you have any questions or commentary, you can drop comments in the chat box or in the Q&A window. Those are both at the bottom of the Zoom window. So feel free to jump in now and with any questions or commentary that you have. Okay, so we had one comment. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very helpful with a focus on SEL. I'm a music educator and music therapist who focuses on this in my work. I am most interested in helping young people feel connected. Then we have a question. Do you incorporate a lot of Latin language chants and hymns?
So I don't work in a Catholic organization, so the answer to that would be no. However, we do that. We have included chant in our repertoire, and we have included definitely different languages of in our approach to the music teaching. Yeah.
Next question. Really appreciate your wonderful webinar. We are trying to work on fundraising for travel expenses going to the Rome Choral Congress in December 2023. How can we help our choir members and their parents in the costs?
So I think that this is a great opportunity for partnership with other organizations. Do you know of other organizations that are, there are many fundraising opportunities that you can do from bake sales and all of that. I like to spend my money more on like big money to support that. So maybe one way is to first like identify what are the benefits of that trip, right? And you can talk to the children about it. I mean, you know what they are as an adult, but what for the kids, what it will be for them, and identify really tangible outcomes of that trip, and then identify organizations that can link to those interests or those positive outcomes, and then you can approach that organization saying, this is what we have, and this will speak to your mission. So that will be a good starting point, just really identifying the specific outcomes of that trip that are positive for the families and for all the transformation that happens on those kids, right? And then find your community partner to be able to that whose those highlights are resonate with them.
Next question. I have a meeting with a Catholic priest tonight to begin a community children's choir in a poor parish here in Querétaro, Mexico. Some advice on looking on how to partner with him and his community.
Oh yeah, I love this. I think that the first one is just to ask the priests, what is their community like? And what are the barriers of the community, and what it will work better for them. For example, what day of the week will be the most successful? Like start really simple. What is the long hanging fruit, right? What is the best time? Uh, Again, what are the barriers? What are the things that keep the kids from coming? What are the potential benefits from having this? And then when you do it, like make sure that is according to the benefits or the schedule of this particular community. It may not be what you think, like Friday too will be great for me. Well, maybe not, it maybe not be great for them. So how can you compromise and make it work for everybody? So I think getting to know that community, that particular priest and the particular community that is surrounding, it is your first step. It's just getting to know them and ask a lot of questions, and then after that, then you can take some action.
We are still struggling with COVID and concerns. How have you dealt with singing and being safe?
I created I invited a group of community leaders to be a task force for these times that are so challenging. I totally understand what you're going through. I think all of us are struggling still. So we are currently singing, and we're singing masked, and we have a bunch of ventilation. We have open doors, open windows, open everything, and on top of that, units of cleaning the air, and then on top of that something else. I mean, we are doing everything, but at this point we're singing. But for some of those hard decisions, sometimes we are not experts, right? We're just trying to do our best. I formed a community task force which has some parents and had some physicians, and they guide the conversation as of what needs to happen as we move forward. So I totally understand where you're coming from, and I think at this point it's really about mitigating risk. But if you want to keep moving on and trying to make music, you just gotta meet. There's no way around it.
What are your favorite resources for non-Western choral music, either
Oh,
SATB or SSA, secular or sacred?
okay, hold on. Where are my?
That's in the chat window.
Okay, so let me just see. Uh, can you repeat? What are your favorite resources for non-Western choral music? Oh, I look at Earth Songs. It has a lot of non-Western choral music. And then look at those composers, right? Composers that are writing in their own native cultures are just the way to go. I am very hesitant sometimes of doing arrangements of things that are, and I look at who is doing it, right? Like you gotta look beyond, like don't feel good because you're doing some South African piece, like you gotta do a little bit more than what is it coming from? Where is the arranger from? Who is the arranger? So to see how authentic it is. And there's just so much. There's Molly Stone, I can write it here, for non-Western. She specializes on especially on South African or African ways of teaching. She sells like a whole digital package of it. So but Earth Songs is a good product, but when a good platform. But if you go to JW Paper or other, just be aware of who the arranger is, and make sure that you always pick the one that is writing in their native culture. That will be most authentic.
Can we give them, and I guess that's the children, a letter to ask for sponsorship?
Yes, I think again, it depends on how comfortable your families feel like that, right? If your families feel, that's a question that you have to ask your families. Are you comfortable? If I give you this, will you be comfortable? Or you can give it as an option. I said, this is an option for you to help me with the sponsorship. Your most closest and best audience is your own community that is like around there. So of course, like your parents definitely should be able to help if it's part of their wheelhouse. But let's just make sure that we give them options. So for those who are not able to do that, that they also feel that they could contribute in other ways.
Um, I have been working on how to balance social emotional learning with music literacy. What have you found effective in utilizing the principles of SEL to help teach music literacy?
I use the rep. I use the rep that is in front of me. So through the rep, we talk about emotions. Through the rep, we talk about the role in our community, depending on the rep. So the rep will be your vehicle to work on SEL and music literacy.
Does the Tucson Girls Choir sing any sacred repertoire? And if so, are there works in the Spanish, Tagalog languages that you have found particularly successful?
Um, I will have to think about that. I have to think about that. I know that we sing a lot in Latin. There is this great, I mean, I know this is not what you're asking, but there is this great set of Magnificat that is for treble voices. It's quite advanced, but I wanna give a shout out to Frank La Roca, who is a very devout Catholic, and he has done this beautiful setting for specifically Spanish. I will have to look into it. So I haven't done much because I don't have it at the forefront of my head of my repertoire. But there's definitely there. So look at Earth songs again and check in there what there are some options there.
Okay. I appreciate your presentation of the idea of the partnership and building relationships through this beautiful work of music. When we approach with our own agenda, it narrows the possibilities. Thank you for the good that you were doing and inspiring us. I may have missed this, but are you only incorporating girl singer choirs or boys too?
So in our choirs in Tucson is only girls, but in both our Tutti choir, which is our choir for kids with disabilities, we welcome everybody, and and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And then in our Tohono Autumn virtual program, we incorporate everyone, and boys and girls. And the reason why the Tutti choir is for everybody is there is not another choir in town that has this, right, that is specialized for, I have a music therapist that is doing this work, and we have a great partnership with our boys choir here in town, and that partnership for me is very important. So I don't want to create a program that is going to make that partnership feel threatened and that I'm not a good friend. So I knew that they will not do that, a program for kids with disabilities. That was not part of their vision at that particular time. So I did it, and we're good. And then at the Tohono Autumn, they are not even here. They are not gonna go there. So it's not a threat, right? But for example, that we have a location in the northwest that of our city, and there's a lot, and we have a new program that started last semester that is like pop a cappella. Basically, it's like pentatonics. I don't know if you're familiar with that group, and the kids absolutely love it. And we do some school visits to recruit for that group, and a lot of boys want to sing. So I called my partner at the boys' chorus and said, I have boys. How would you feel if we open this to boys? And she said, like I really want to recruit from that side of town for our program. They don't have a pop a cappella, but they want to recruit for our program. So I didn't open it to boys because for me that partnership with the boys chorus is extremely important, and I don't want to jeopardize that.
I'm struggling with maintaining students in the program, especially adolescents. How can we create a sense of discipline in our parents? Do you use or recommend any way of rewarding them for assisting consistently?
So I will ask first, like, what is your relationship with them? Have you what is the dynamic inside the classroom when you talk about parents and students. So I wonder if there has been an open communication about why these kids are missing whatever the expectation is. First is the expectation clear, and if not, what the kids are why are they missing? So knowing the reasons why will help you. I think will help you dictate some of the action items that need to happen afterwards, and like an open conversation of like, I don't like the rap that you're singing or whatever. And it may be something hard to hear sometimes, but I think maybe creating smaller blocks of smaller goals. I found with teenagers that sometimes there's like bigger chunks of responsibility are just very overwhelming for them. I've been working with teenagers for 15 years. So I would step back before I create any other layer of rules as to ask why is it that they are not coming. And I don't want to assume, I don't want us to assume anything, but really learn the cause, maybe learn from the students and maybe learn from the parent, and maybe that will take just a few phone calls, like we were talking about in the presentation. Like, are you creating those relationships with them where they know you and you know them and you know what their story is? Maybe it will take some time for you to get to the bottom of it, right? And then, but with that information, you're going to be able to make changes that are more profound and more relevant, and you just making stuff up that it may just further alienate people.
Okay, we're just about out of time. One more question. Can you speak a bit about the challenges of using music from the African American traditions?
Um, I'm not an expert on that. What is the question? Can I speak of the what?
So this is using music from the African American traditions, and the challenges associated with that.
Well, the challenges will be if you do them in a way that is disrespectful and not knowing the background of what it comes from and where you are putting it in the program. There's a lot of talk about not, putting it at the end of the program because there's happiness and claps. These have profound meaning. So I think it all comes down to learning about the tradition. The problem with any tradition is not the African American tradition, is when you don't know about them and then you're not curious about learning, and then you just go and just do them flippantly. I think any repertoire that you're gonna do that is not part of your own culture, you just need to approach it with curiosity, right? And scholarship, and just learn a little bit more about it. There's nothing problematic per se, unless you do it in a way that is ignorant of it, right? And that is not back up with knowledge of how this should be used, how this should be sung, what is idiomatically appropriate, and not to tokenize it in a way where we just put it at the end and everyone is clapping and everyone is happy, right? I mean, to just really go beyond what is on the page, but really know about the background of the piece. That is the problem, but I wouldn't say that is a problem with the African American repertoire. Is a problem with any other one that is not part of the Western culture.
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Molina, for being here today and this wonderful presentation. It's been very informative. We got some good dialogue going over this topic. I wanted to remind everyone that I will be sending out a copy of the recording or a link to the recording within a few days of this webinar, and also a survey. So if I could ask for you to fill that out, and it helps with our future programming for webinars. And if you had nothing else to say on the topic, I guess we will wrap things up today. And thank you again, Dr. Molina, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. There is here our information. If you have any more questions, please always feel free to email me and ask for maybe feedback or questions about, not that I have all the answers, but I'm happy to brainstorm with you. And then again, there is more information about Puerto Cantor, the sponsor of this webinar, and about their work that they do. So visit them and reach out if you have any questions.
Hey, thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.